Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions. With your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of black metal origins, looking at some proto or early black metal bands from the mid to 80s that sort of led the way into the black metal that we know today. Something I do want to clarify: in the past couple of videos, I have said that this style of music is kind of thrash plus satanic imagery, and technically thrash hadn't come out yet. Thrash was actually inspired from what these bands were doing rather than the other way around, which is how I had understood it. So thank you to everybody who's been correcting me on that. I will address that and not say that again. But it does kind of put more importance on some of these bands we're checking out because they are influential on two styles of metal rather than one. So with that said, let's dive into this. We have some Celtic Frost today. The song is Into the Crypts of Rays, which is an interesting song title. I'm not sure it makes much sense to me the way I'm reading it. We'll get into the song though and see what's up. So yeah, let's dive into this and see what Celtic Frost is bringing to us today. That bass kick is punchy. Yeah, yeah. Ooh. It's interesting how this keeps moving from that super fast, flashy stuff into more and more groovier aspects. Each iteration just gets groovier. Well, now we're back to this. It's not just the bass kick either, the bass guitar is super punchy as well. There's just a lot of bass presence in this recording. Interesting volume change on the vocals there. Yeah, the last two times that he said into the Crypts of Rays, it's like he got closer to the microphone and it got louder and it was more present. And it just kind of ties into some of the ideas I have in this track, once again, much like yesterday's Bathory, where there seems to be a lot of looseness as far as performance. And again, I'm not sure if this is a thing of, a product of the times where they didn't have the resources to, do another take possibly if they were doing one take recordings on tape, or, I'm not, I think I, I read a comment about the production that was going on around this time, but I can't quite remember if they had moved on to, moved away from that single take tape recording yet or not. Uh, but yeah, I don't know if it's a product of their resources, of what they could achieve in the recording process, or if it was just something that was a part of the genre, the feel of it. Because, Bathory did the same thing where it's the small imperfections that are left in here. And you can really hear it on the bass kicks, being that they're so prominent, so punchy, they get through everything, is that they're not always exact. There's a couple of moments where it feels more like it's moving into a triplet feel rather than being every offbeat, which would be eighth notes, straight eighth notes rather than triplets. And it's this minor variation that's going on in there. The guitars I couldn't really tell because there's so much fuzz and distortion going on there. But like vocal volume was not consistent. And even with that phrase, into the crypts of rays, it's very rigid, very staccato, but every once in a while, certain syllables would have a little bit more weight or a little bit more trail to them. Longer fade to hold on to something. And you could tell that it wasn't this idea that we do in a lot of modern day productions, especially in mainstream areas where we'll take, especially something that's repeated so often. Into the Crypts of Rays was said a dozen times, at least in this track, where you would record, multiple takes and either compose an artificial take by taking the best portions of all of them, or even just taking the best take itself and copy pasting it throughout. Every single time it was said in this case was said, what, was actually recorded, different takes, different styles to them. Even there is no consistency to that, and it adds this human component to the song. It feels like I'm listening to it live rather than listening to an overproduced studio version. And like I said yesterday, I absolutely adore that. I love that human element of imperfection when I listen to music. Now, that's not to say I don't like overproduced stuff. It definitely has its place, and there's some phenomenal songs that are highly produced and created to perfection. And sometimes perfection is beautiful, but sometimes imperfection is just as beautiful. And it's one of the things that I appreciate looking back at, not even just necessarily this week's black metal origins, but pretty much anything in the older realm, especially when they're doing one take recordings. And it's not about making the perfect recording of a song, but the one with the least amount of mistakes. And just being able to hear those little flubs adds so much character, I think, to the song. So that's something that I really picked up here. Is the inconsist I don't want to call them mistakes, the inconsistencies. Because for all I know, the inconsistencies could have been exactly what they wanted. you know. So it might not be a mistake, but it definitely creates inconsistency, which is in stark contrast to a lot of the high levels of consistency that we're seeing in modern production. Let's get to the mix. So this one's interesting. I feel like it sort of walks the line between Venom's almost very clean extreme metal kind of sound and Bathory's proto lo-fi kind of vibe going on, where there's a lot of clarity in here. The vocals, I think, are fairly clear. The drums are not, though. And the guitars kind of balance out that fuzz versus clarity. Um, and I think it's really interesting to see. This would have been phenomenal to see in real time, being, having been around in the 80s and keeping up with this underground, I would assume, scene of extreme metal music and watching how these different bands were doing the same thing, but subtle variations. Venom was taking more of a clean feel. And Bathory was said, you know what? Let's go lo-fi on ours. Let's. I mean, maybe that's not exactly the words they were thinking, but they were crafting their own sound, and it just happened to lead into something very popular. But then you get Celtic Frost. It's kind of doing both of these. The vocals I think are clean. They're a bit of a gritty, like a compressed, clean vocal. So that mixed with the production give them, to me, less of a black metal feel. Listening to it, knowing what black metal becomes, but the production on the music, I think, fits perfectly. I think this is sort of, to me, this is what black metal sort of evolves into. This would be the non-lo-fi black metal sound right here, where the guitars are super distorted, super crunchy. A lot of that tone is really destroyed by some of these, the overdrive and the distortion put on top of it. You can make out notes, but it's more of a feeling than actually hearing the notes themselves, or at least that's how I perceive this heavily deteriorated sound that is kind of endemic of black metal. But it's not so far gone like it was with Bathory's track, where the fuzz was the sound from the guitars. This one still has a little bit of that timbre underneath it all. And then the drums are super muddy, super pushed down into the mix. They don't have much oomph at all, except for the bass kick for some reason. And we're going to get into that in a second. But the cymbals were highly muted. The snare was, it was missing the crispness. And again, these are kind of things that I associate with what black metal has become. So it's like I said, it's so interesting to see where we're at now and where we came from and what possibly inspired, the modern idea of it. But I think the big takeaway here is that production-wise, this song is missing the high end. It's missing the treble. There's one instrument that really carries the treble to me, for me anyways, is the vocals. They seem to be in this pocket of space at the top of the song, kind of by themselves. The guitars should be there, but so much of that core timbre, at least to my ears, is overshadowed by the fuzz and distortion, which kind of, it's like white noise, but my brain kind of puts it into the bass camp for some reason. I never hear that as a high pitched sound. I don't know if everybody's like that, but to me, it puts the guitars lower than the guitar. It puts it into the same area that the drums and bass are in, and the drums, like I said, are really tuned down, and they've lost the crispness. I think it means that they EQ'd the treble down a bit on the drums, but what I ended up hearing is more of a muffled snare. And then the bass is just sort of like a really low punchiness to it. Even the cymbals were a bit muted. So all of the crisp higher end treble stuff in the drums are missing. And it makes this empty pocket at the top of the song that the vocals very narrowly rest in. It's not like they're big booming vocals at all. They're not filling all of this extra space above the band. They're just kind of taking a little spot of it. And it makes the song feel very narrow to me, very empty. And yeah, it's the same feeling I get from a lot of lo-fi black metal stuff, where it feels narrow and empty around the music, but they went about it in a slightly different way. And it's still about compression and distortion, and creating more of a narrow sound overall. But yeah, they just do it in a different way. and I'm not quite sure I have the words to put in how it's different, but I hope that the vibe is kind of understood how this is different from like lo-fi black metal, even though they're both using the same tools and achieving the same effect. Um, but yeah, so that like the whole tone of the song is just really interesting to me because it feels like this vocalist is isolated on top of this massive foundation of uh, bassiness and white noise. And I'm really curious about what's going on with that bass kick. It is prominent to the point that it's annoying. And again, maybe that's just me, but it was just so front and center that you can't ignore it. And it's just always there like a heartbeat or like a I don't know. It was interesting for a couple of seconds and then I got real tired of it. Um, what else is interesting too is, lately I've started talking about panning, right? Especially a lot of modern rock bands are panning the two guitars to either side and leaving the drums, bass, and guitar center. And I've actually acclimated to this sound a lot. I really enjoy it. I think it's a fantastic way of isolating, or not isolating, separating melodic lines. And it's really interesting to go back to this where it feels like everything is centered, everything's right in front of you. And again, it just kind of gives you that live feeling. It doesn't feel like a studio production. It feels like you're in front of a stage and the music is coming at you. There's mistakes being heard. The production is not super clean, and the vocalist is having all these inconsistencies in delivery because they're human. They can't repeat the same phrase perfectly a dozen times. And it all just kind of ties together into this feeling of a live performance, and I really like that. Moving on into song structure, which I think is an interesting one because the song follows an ABC pattern, and then it goes like A B B. We have like a verse, chorus, bridge, and then we come back to the verse, chorus again, and I think we just do a second chorus to finish it out. So it's like A B C A B B, which is fun. It really is fun. It keeps me on my toes, and it kind of removes a bit of the repetition there as well. And, even breaking up the monotony of the repetition is the fact that even when we get a repeated section, it's going to be slightly different due to the aforementioned concept of inconsistency. So, yeah, that's just a really cool thing a really cool way to go about writing this song, I think. Um, Also, pertaining to that, is that, ah, man, the C section was actually two different sections, wasn't it? Because we had the verse, and then we had the chorus where he was saying into the crypts of rays, and then we had our first like groove section, and then we half-timed that and hit a harder groove. So was it like A B C D A B B? Yeah, I mean it's a really cool song structure that I think works well because it plays around with the idea of linearity and then backtracks and says, you know what, we'll bring back the stuff you like. We'll bring back the verse, we'll do another one, and then we'll finish out on a big chorus. Um, and yeah, so I really dig that. But I also really like this idea of taking that thrash feel, which it works. It covers that aggression, that energy, that drive that thrash is all about. But it's not really my cup of tea. I really have to be in the mood for that. I'm more of a groove guy. I really dig some groove, and hearing them cut the constant like punky, fast-paced, alternating snare and bass idea, and sort of introducing a bit of groove was beautiful. And honestly, I thought that's where that was going to end. I thought the guitar line in this section was nice. They kind of cut back the speed a little bit, pulled off the tremolo picking, and went for more of a strong melodic idea. And then we halftime that and went to something even groovier. And I really appreciate that. Again, that's just my biases. I'm not a huge fan of the thrash sound unless I'm really in the mood for it. So I'm sure there are people who come to this band or any of these early black metal bands wanting that speed and aggression, and they find that these halftime sections are kind of meh, right? They're not the highlight. It's the inverse of my experience, and that's fair too. But I really appreciate that they're including some contrast in here because we really haven't seen contrast at all this week. Both Bathory and Venom went about raw energy from start to finish. They had a couple of sections that might have introduced a small amount of groove. I think it was Bathory that kind of went back and forth for a little bit. They would do like the super fast aggression and then a bar or two of the like groove and then bounce back and forth, but that was short lived. And I actually might be confusing that with Weakling now that I think about it. Which we checked out yesterday. No, Monday? Monday. We checked that one out Monday. That was a modern black metal track, though. I think it was modern. Anyways, but yeah, so mostly just raw aggression, and I really enjoy having contrast and backing it off a little bit for this track. It works better for my tastes, at least. All right, so now we should dive into the lyrics, I think. Yeah, let's get into that. And this is a bit of a depressing one, isn't it? Apparently, there's this dude, Gilles de Reyes. I don't know how to pronounce that because it's French and I don't quite know how the double L is pronounced. Anyways, this dude, according to this, was one of the French marshals and personal guard for Jeanne d'Arc, and he killed children. Yep. That's the whole song is about him killing kids. And that's man, that is not what I was expecting. And the thing is, if this would have been another song about Satanism, that would have been a relief. So yeah, this is the first track off of or that we've checked out this week that isn't utilizing satanic imagery and is actually just talking about something highly morbid, which works because the album's called Morbid Tales. They're not wrong there. And I'm also seeing that this is basically the first track. There is an intro track to the album, but it's has no lyrics, and I'm going to wager it's fairly short. I don't have a time length on it, but most intros are usually not too lengthy. So this would be the first proper song on the album, and I think that's definitely a way to start with Morbid Tales. So this breaks my theory that black metal was sort of that thrashy sound with satanic imagery, and I mean, it's definitely morbid. And maybe that's going to be the lyrical cohesion between some of these songs. And we'll see tomorrow and Friday. We'll see what the themes are, and maybe I'll make a new hypothesis by Friday about what the prospective themes might be in some of these songs. But also, originally I'd come to understand black metal as thrash plus satanic imagery. And, well, the thrash, you guys have corrected that. That came after the fact. So it's sort of this sound plus satanic imagery, and now possibly not even a satanic imagery is going to be part of what made this proto black metal, what tied it all together. So it's really, this song alone in the middle of the week has really had me reconceptualize and reevaluate what I'm piecing together about these genres and tying them together into what would tie them together, what would bring them together as a whole to represent this proto or first wave black metal stuff. Now, tying the lyrics into the music, I mean, you have hyper aggressive music with the. Oh man, we'll get into that. We have this hyper aggressive music, lots of energy, lots of drive. The lyrics are harsh, they're harshly delivered, and I think all of that works well when you're talking about a serial killer who preyed on kids. It just kind of fits well within that. But then what I was thinking of was the bass kick just having so much prominence, and I even mentioned it felt like a heartbeat, and I mean that's just, man, feels like an elevated heartbeat, and we're talking about a serial killer. So yeah, and so then now the title makes sense to me, into the crypts of Rays. I couldn't figure that out because Rays is plural, and I was thinking the crypts of Ray would make sense. But the crypts of Rays, the dude's name was Gilles de Rays. So, yep, it is his several crypts that he kept these bodies or whatever. Man, that is just a depressing way to end this video. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I started looking at lyrics and tying things together. It really strengthens my analyses. And then other times I'm like, why did I have to look at the lyrics? I would have been just fine not knowing about this. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought about this one. Let me know if you have any context you want to add. Like I said, I'm still reevaluating kind of what this early black metal was. I started off with something that was completely wrong, and I'm still trying to figure it out. If you want to help me, like I said, add any context to anything that was going on here. It doesn't necessarily have to be about Celtic Frost, although I always look about future or extra information about what I've listened to. But yeah, I'm still trying to understand this whole era of metal. So if you have anything that helps me with that, go ahead and drop those kind of comments. I'm looking forward to them. Above the comment section, there's a description box, and there is a link for Linktree. Take you to this place. Right here is everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Discord community, support me through Patreon, all sorts of stuff. It's all in there. Go ahead and check it out. And above the description box, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, in 3 more minutes, we're going to have our special selection come out for today. It's, I don't even know what it is. It's a band called Terminus. Never heard of them before. I don't know what I'm in store for. If that doesn't interest you, though, not, don't know the band, don't want to learn about some new music, expand your musical horizons, whatever, that's fine. I completely understand. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. We're going to look at our penultimate black metal song and another special selection. All right, until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.